What is up, selectors? This is Travis, aka Hellfire. I'm bringing you the data of the most recent summer ceremony, except part 2, since we managed to actually have 2 summer ceremonies this time, all involving the P03 set. So, we're just going to go straight into it. Our top 16 breakout looks like this. Top 3 places were all No Limit Hirana. 4th place, we got Card Jockey Lion. 5th place, Akino No Limit. 6th and 7th, we got Card Jockey Lion. 8th place, Uchu Tamago. 9th place, No Limit Hirana. 10th place, No Limit Ray. 11th place, the first Dream Team we've seen in top 16. Dream Team with Hirana Center with a Madoka Akino assists. 12th place, No Limit Hirana. 13th, Ray No Limit. 14th, Card Jockey Lion. 15th, No Limit Hirana. And 16th, No Limit Ray. Now, it's a lot of No Limit. Compared to the last ceremony where it was kind of like evened out between everything, this is a lot of No Limit. Specifically, also Hirana Center. But, so total decks, how they're looking out. Our top 3 decks this ceremony was Hirana with 28 showing, Nova with 25 showing, and Lion in 3rd with 22 showing. Now, this, just take Lion, move it to 3rd, move the other 2 up. That's what you get for this ceremony. A little bit different from the last one. A lot more Hiranas than we see Nova, considering Nova had a really strong first place finish in the last ceremony. You would think there would be more, but doesn't seem to be the case this time. But other decks we've got going on, we have Ray at 14 decks, Muzica 10 decks, along with Tamago at 10 decks. Both at 6 decks, we have Sangha and Akino, followed by Wolf and Madoka with 5. Also, Toko with 5. We've had surprising to see Niji Sanji this ceremony, but hey, we'll take it. Love It had 3 decks. He's alongside Dream Team Bang decks with 3 and Uchu decks with 3. Coming in at 2 decks, we have Tawil with Ancient Surprise and Dream Team Hirana decks. And then last, we have Ancient Surprise at, Dream Team at, and Niji Sanji Anj with 1 deck each. Now, I love this spread of decks. I'm glad Niji Sanji made an appearance again. Unfortunately, remembering the results, I don't think it did that well, but gotta show some love for show some love for Oshis. Am I right, Niji Sanji followers? But biggest thing here now is I want to talk about the main deck. Now, from the last time we did the ceremony data, I presented the top 5 cards in every single deck. Basically outlined what the core of a deck for these teams looked like in the P03. Now, instead of doing it this time, because the data really wasn't that much different, instead I'm outlining the top 5 changes in the deck. And I'm not talking about like, oh, most, like, we got No Limit Hirana on screen right now. I'm not talking about how many copies of a card they're running. I'm talking about how the frequency of how these cards are showing in the decks that are No Limit Hirana. So it could be a positive change, it can be a negative change, as long as it's in the top 5 like percentages in a base value. That's what I'm looking at here. So we're gonna push forward. So coming at first, top 5 main deck changes for Hirana. First place, we've got Mars with a 35.4% increase from the last ceremony, followed by Volcanic at a 33.39 increase from the last ceremony. Up next, Zhao Yun with a decrease of almost half of what its percentage was, a 31.83% decrease in showings with decks. Percival, we got a 78% showing total with a 26% increase. And last but not least, Sita had a 25.62% increase for this ceremony. Now, Volcanic and Sita have really good life bursts that deal well with the Nova matchups. Those matchups tend to have 7, 8k walls really early, so being able to have these kind of life bursts is really strong for the deck. Now, Mars Assassin gets around a lot of the walls that can be presented. Zhao Yun's kind of a moot card, so I could see the decrease because you're not really caring about things wiping your field as much, so this isn't ran as much, but to offset the white, I could see why Percival is being ran more, because you do have cards like Miracle Draw, Good Dig, and stuff like that appearing in these Hirana decks. Moving on to No Limit Ray decks. No Limit Ray, we have, coming in first for the top 5 main deck changes, Kagutsuchi with a 37.5% increase. Hijikata had a 35.71 decrease, followed by Nobunaga with a 19.64 increase, Neon Tetra with a 17.86 decrease, and last but not least, Eternal Influence with a 16.07 decrease. Now, Hijikata and Neon Tetra are the shocking ones here, considering there was the prior ceremony, there seemed a lot of freeze strategy, discard strategy involving Neon Tetras, Bradamantes, Hijikatas, and stuff like that. And more of an increase of the red side of Ray decks, so it's probably pushing a more aggressive style play. Nobunaga has the Vanish and the Double Crutch. Kagutsuchi has a little bit of consistency, being able to bring Signy from your trash to the field. So it's probably pushing for a more consistent tried and true method like Hirana does with all of its consistency, but opting in for some of the pieces that blue has, such as hand discard and freezing, to help push a little more control than just straight aggro that Hirana decks push. That's all we got for No Limit decks. We're going to be moving on to the card jockey decks. Starting off with Lion, we have a 28.91% increase in Churn leading off the bunch, a 21.27 increase in Penlight with Lion. Gawain has a 15% decrease from the last ceremony. Arquin has a 14% decrease from the last ceremony. And last but not least, Eternal Influence with a 12% decrease. I could see where the decrease of Eternal Influence coming from, instead opting towards Deafening Inferno because of the life burst and vanishing up Signies. Arquin, I could also see, instead of pushing more favor towards Penlight, which has a guard tax, or not a guard tax, sorry, an attack tax to other decks. So decks that can hit off multi-attacks, Lion decks, Nova decks get punished. Basically any deck gets punished by Penlight if you can't get rid of it off of the field. Especially considering it can get Shadow just if you cast a spell. And, you know, Card Jockey having access to a lot of spells, needing a lot of spells for Endless Punchline can help out with the Penlight. The Churn one is the one that surprises me. Probably opting to regenerate some Enter to be able to pay for some of these costs. For example, if I've seen some Card Jockey decks running Kome, so they want that extra Enter to be able to offset like the Glory Go costs and other things. So moving on from Card Jockey Lion, we have Uchu Tamago next for its changes. And the Uchu changes were a lot more surprising than I expected, but a lot uniform I could see. So leading off, we have Kiyosumi with a 50% increase. It wasn't even in decks the last ceremony. So Kiyosumi coming in strong in over half of the decks shown for Tamago is quite surprising to me. I'm pretty sure it could be attributed to the ability to rearrange the opponent's board to actually be able to clear things. Up next, Triumphed at 80%, probably for the Demeters. Needed Waffle Ice at a whopping 40% as well, bring it up to 90%, focusing more on that freeze strat that Uchi really likes. Same with Royal Blue at 100% representation, which is up 33.3 from the last ceremony. Royal was just, the Life Burst on Royal just makes it worth it in a freeze deck, in all honesty, especially when you think about Lion and Nova wanting to get multiple attacks with their Lyrigs. And finally, Bradamante. As much as we want to focus on the freeze strat, Bradamante really doesn't fit with what the Tamago decks I've seen want to do, we see a 30% reduction on that, bringing it to 20% representation for Tamago decks. Up next on the list, we have Uchu Nova. Now, Uchu Nova, we see a full reduction of Churin being taken out of the deck. So up next, we have a 24.2 increase on Blue Whalen, a 16% decrease on Arkwin, a 11.1 increase in inclusion on Random Drain, bringing it to 100% representation, and a full reduction of Elena, bringing it down to from 11.1 to 0. Now, Churin and Elena, I can understand to a degree. Elena kind of hinders you because you want to be using Random Drains to hinder your opponent's hand, so the fact that you can't even use your own Random Drains, I can see why it's not being ran. I can see why it's cut. Churin, not so much. I feel like the enter for Nova is really needed, so cutting Churin's interesting to me, but if you play it right, it's not real. There's other things you could use instead of Churin, like the increase in Blue Whalen I really like, because Blue Whalen's a way to open up lanes to help push more damage since you don't have access to Assassin, stuff like that. You have Lancer with Demeters, but it can only go so far. If your opponent has no life cloth, Demeter's not going to do anything. So I like the inclusion of the Blue Whalen in Nova decks. So moving on to Diagram Muzica. So our top 5 for Muzica decks is a 27% increase in AC, a 25% reduction in Hydrus, a 23% reduction in Helium, a 22% increase in Kiyosumi, bringing it up to that 100% inclusion rate, and finally a 20% reduction in Phalaris, which the Phalaris one kind of surprises me, but I can see why. Considering the harmony cost of needing to down Tuli Rigs, you can only realistically get one of these on the stage, and even then it's at late game depending on what you're facing against, because as this gets off the field, then you don't really get what it wants to do off. Hydrus is also an interesting one to me. It's one of the tanky options that I felt blue could present to Diagram, but since Muzica in itself wants to focus on a mill strategy and a power reduction strategy in a sense, I could see the cut for it to play other things. Moving on to Diagram Madoka. Diagram Madoka has, leading off the pack, a 67.5% increase in Heket, a 47.5% decrease in Dark Energy, a 35% decrease in Water Buffalo, a 27.5% increase in Thrilling, and a full removal of Trouble, reducing it from 25% to 0. Which, to me, I feel like taking out the Trouble kind of... Why would you take out the Trouble for Heket? Or for more Thrilling... Well, let me rephrase that. Thrilling's a draw 2, ditch 1 unless you exceed 4. Trouble's just a straight draw 3 for 1 extra cost. And considering the increase in Hekets, I feel like you wouldn't want to cut down on the Troubles, considering it's a straight draw 3, and that kind of benefits with Heket, whereas the Thrilling becomes a draw 2, ditch 1. It's basically a filter, plus replacing itself in its hand, without the exceed cost. The exceed cost is a Trouble, but cheaper. But you can only do that once. Compared to Trouble, you can do it as many times as you draw the card. So that's it for the biggest main deck changes. There was some major changes with Sangha, but they were all uniformly a 33% change, to where it made it difficult to actually highlight what these changes, because it was basically a whole new deck for Sangha. So if you want to check out what those changes actually looked like, I've got the links to both data sets from the past 2 ceremonies down below in the description for everyone to check out at their own leisure. So moving on to the other stats, I'm going to keep it simple, keep it sweet. I'm going to be looking at end of the turn and Zeno cluster usage, since those seem to be the really popular pieces that people like to run in this format. So end of the turn usage. So for this ceremony, we have a 12.5% decrease. 4 of the 16 decks in top 16 are using it. The top 64 is the same as the last ceremony, 18 of the 64 with a 28.12%, and overall we have 34 out of the 152 players using it, which is only a 3% decrease from the last ceremony. With an extra 30 players only seeing a 3% decrease, you can average it out. It's roughly the same. It's obviously not the same, but it's roughly the same as the last ceremony, which is good to see. End of the Turn's one of those really consistent pieces that I like. And last but not least, Zeno cluster usage. We all know Zeno cluster. It's the one thing that I know I stressed it in the last one that could really help the Nova matchup. So, considering all of its discard. So, top 16, we have 4 out of 16 decks using it, which is a 6.25% increase from the last ceremony. The top 64, 11 of the 64 are using it, which is a 4.7% decrease from the last ceremony, bringing it to 17.18%. And overall, 22 of the 152 decks were using it in this one, which is a full decrease of 11.17. Now, that's a major decrease for Zeno cluster. I don't think these numbers are going to stick going into Deus Ex Machina, considering all of the enter burn that DXM has to bring to the table. You're really going to want these Zeno clusters. Otherwise, you could honestly see Deus decks just reigning, or not Deus decks, sorry, X decks just reigning supreme just because they can't be punished with Zeno clusters. And we're going to wrap that up here. Thank you all for watching / listening. If you want updates when I post stuff, don't forget to like this video, subscribe. Once again, I'll have the links to all the data for this and the past ceremonies down below. And once again, been Travis / Hellfire, and I will see you all after the now August 14th ceremony with more data.